Chapter 32. A Dwarf and an Elf. The Maelstrom, said Flambeau aboard Julian's airship. Nothing comes out of there again. So they tell me, said Julian, but my brother is in there, and I intend to get him out. He would do the same for me, he said emphatically. This is suicide, said Flambeau. No ship, man, woman, or creature can enter the Maelstrom and live to tell the tale. No one from here, but maybe she can. He gestured to Ruby with a nod. Me? Said Ruby. I don't want to go near that thing, she said, seeing the growing mass of grey clouds in the distance. You'd prefer to be back at the palace with the prince? Asked Julian, partaking in his pleasures? Ruby shuddered. I thought not, said Julian with a grin. I have the coordinates for where my brother's ship has crashed. He's right on the edge of the storm. Ruby, if you just go to the ship and see if he's there, I'll take you to wherever you want to go. That's all I ask. How long has he been there? Ruby asked. A few days, said Julian solemnly. With enough rations, he could still be okay, he said, quickly anticipating Flambeau's protests. I know my brother. He'd be smart about it. He's always been the smart one, he said with a grin. To a fault, of course. Too smart for his own good at times. Hence why he's in the trouble he's in now. Thought he'd go the most direct way home from a recon mission to the north of the continent. Of course, that meant skirting the edge of the maelstrom, didn't it? Got himself stuck, and me worried ever since, he finished with a sigh. I saw what you did with the edge. I've got no doubt you'll be able to go in and snag him from his ship. Then we'll be back together again, and you'll be off to wherever it is that you want to go. Flambeau glared at Ruby. Her eyes held a suspicious expression for what she was hearing. I do not know if your brother is alive, said Ruby, regarding Flambeau, but I trust you will help me if I'm able to help you. Of course, replied Julian, to a wide-eyed Flambeau who shook her head. It's not like you've got a better alternative, he said with a laugh. We're coming up on the maelstrom now. Hey, is that down there? Where? Asked Ruby, pressing herself against the glass to see. Far below was a lone figure before the edge of the maelstrom. To Ruby, it appeared as though he had brown hair. Take us down right now, she ordered. All right, said Julian. Take it easy. They landed upon the ground, and all headed outside to behold the city-sized maelstrom that blotted out the sky. Ruby did not stare at the giant storm, instead became instantly searching for Kobe. Kobe? Kobe? She shouted above the noise of the storm. She could not find him anywhere. Flashes of lightning and winds whipped up and dropped away, making it hard to see. Deflated, she returned to the ship. Any luck? Said Julian. I must have imagined who it was, but there was definitely someone down there, said Ruby. Whoever it was. I don't know if they can survive without an edge. I'll go, said Ruby, turning to Flambeau. Please, we're coming too, said Flambeau flatly. But you can't. I can, said Flambeau sharply, and will. No one orders me around. Not any more. She walked with her head held high towards the maelstrom, the dog following in tow. Ruby stumbled across the ground, leaving Julian waving excitedly after them. Ruby placed the red ring upon her finger. It began spreading up across her hand and on her arm, forming the dragon gauntlet. She felt the power course through her veins, and charged into the maelstrom. Solomon could barely contain his rage as they flew towards the massive grey storm atop the giant birds. He glanced at various times at Ekru, who sat smugly upon the bird, not glancing to see the dirty expression Solomon was giving him. The wind whistled in Solomon's ears, making communication only possible via the mind links. There was some discussions about the approach to the storm, and it was agreed they'd fly as close as the birds would allow and travel the remainder of the way on foot, lest they get caught in the high winds and be blown off their saddles. Solomon had seen the maelstrom before atop the howling heights, but he had not been prepared for the sheer size of the storm as they flew closer. It was though as an enormous grey dome covered the earth, impossible to see into, save for flashes of lightning within. What is in there? Solomon asked via his mind link. Death, replied Ekru bluntly. Not for him, corrected Cyber. So believes my father. He may be immune to the forces that keep us out of there. Let's hope so, lest he become a mindless wight, said Ekru dryly. Solomon wanted to say something, but was interrupted by a blast of wind that knocked the birds off course, scattering them in all directions. Solomon corrected the bird's trajectory and regained his flight path. He glanced to see the others had done so as well, yet the winds grew stronger, making it impossible to fly any further onwards. Seems like we're walking from here, said Cyber. But we're so far away from the storm, complained Ekru. I don't see us getting any closer by wings, do you? Countered Cyber. Ekru muttered something inaudible and drove his bird down to the ground. Cyber and Solomon followed suit. They landed upon the rough, rugged terrain, sand and rocks making it uneasy footing as they dismounted. The birds will return to Reinhardt. It's not safe for them to be out here, not with the maelstrom so close, said Cyber. We will march to the edge of the maelstrom and set up camp before proceeding. Best to ensure we are prepared for the Deadlands, and whatever might be lurking in the grey, she said ominously. Charming name, said Ekru. The Deadlands. I'd hope none of us take up permanent residence here. He cast his beady eyes past Solomon, a smug expression upon his face. What's that supposed to mean? Shot back Solomon, marching forward. You intend on trying to kill me like you did at the hotel? Now, we wouldn't want to lose our heads. Not if you believe the tales of what the Maelstrom can do, he said with a timid grin. What of them? Asked Cyber. It's just fairy tales to scare children. I'm sure we'll find out the truth soon enough, said Ekru, his eyes not leaving Solomon. Cyber sent the other birds back to Reinhardt, and they began walking across the sandy dunes towards the maelstrom. Wind whipped up the sand into a storm they needed to protect themselves from. The maelstrom began to blot out the light of the sun as they moved closer, the skies darkening overhead as the ominous fog from the maelstrom seeped out. Solomon saw as the ground had a thin layer of fog resting atop it, making traversal difficult. Several times Ekru tripped and fell as the fog thickened, hiding rocks buried underneath the sand unbeknownst to him, making Solomon happy every time it happened. Soon the sky began to darken, and a cold wind began to blow across the open plains. Here is where we leave you to your duty, Solomon, said Cyber. She lowered her head and brought forth a necklace tucked beneath her top. It was a small yellow sun. The Reinhardt edge? Said Ekru, moving close in to inspect it. His eyes were wide with greed. This is for Solomon alone to carry, said Cyber. I'm simply admiring it, said Ekru. She stared at him suspiciously, and handed the edge to Solomon. Do not take it off, and give it to no one, she instructed. Solomon admired the medallion. It was hot within his hands as he held it. Should it be warm? He asked, feeling its heat intensify. Solomon regarded him strangely. The medallion is cold, Solomon. I've been wearing it all this. Ouch! Exclaimed Solomon, dropping the sun medallion out of his hand, still holding it by the chain. He could feel the heat emanating from the medallion, even as it hung near his body. Cyber stepped forward and waved her hand in front of the medallion, then grasped it. It's cold, Solomon, she said. Solomon felt the heat of the sun only grow hotter and hotter. Soon even holding it by the chain became uncomfortable. I'm not lying. It's getting hotter, he said in a panicked voice. Why don't you let me carry it then? Offered Ekru. No, exclaimed Solomon and Cyber together. Ekru shrugged. Then you'd better stop complaining and get moving. Solomon held the medallion by its furthest point on the chain and stared at Cyber. What do I need to do? He asked. Walk into the maelstrom, find out whatever is going on in there, and come back out again. Sounds simple enough, said Solomon dryly, and hesitantly entered the grey.